Coogs house. I said it probably wouldn't happen. I said it was a lateral move. I said it was a contract negotiation tactic. I said a lot of things that apparently are not true because it happened. So let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, and I weirdly feel like today's going to be a day that attracts a lot of those. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today, making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougars. If you enjoy the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below about a time you were wrong, because I was very wrong on this one. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, best place to get last minutes at the lowest prices guaranteed. But got to talk a little bit about today's news of the day. I had a whole show planned, so we'll get into talking about the offense coordinator options and Big 12 things and all of that. But before we get to any of that, reports are that Shiel Wood is on his way to Lubbock as I record this to accept a defensive coordinator position at Texas Tech. Yes, the same Shiel Wood who was the defensive coordinator for the Houston Cougars just last season. The defense under Shiel Wood at Houston ranked in the top 30 nationally, spent a chunk of the season ranked atop the Big 12. I think finished technically second in total defense in the Big 12. And he's expected to take the same position at Texas Tech. Lots of things flying around the internet on this one. And I want to just spend a segment talking about what we got right now, right? Rumors were going into Tuesday that Texas Tech was going to reach out to him. I mentioned on Tuesday's show that it felt like a contract stunt. Like, hey, he had 1 year, $750,000 left on his contract. He's going to take the Tech offer. He go back up to Houston, his buddy Willie Fritz, and say, hey, beat this. And with Dana Holgerson's contract situation and Houston just getting some money because Nebraska just hired him, so it's money they don't owe Willie or don't owe Dana anymore. You would have thought that this money could have spent on this hire. Instead, it sounds like, and this is between some DMs, between reading what Duarte wrote for the Chronicle and between reading a couple other things out there on Football Scoop and stuff like that, and talking to my Texas Tech guy a little bit. Shout out to Chris, by the way. Chris Level was a good dude. Sounds like the school was, working to sweeten the deal or something with Shiel Wood, but they didn't necessarily get a whole lot of opportunity to do that. He didn't really talk a whole lot about anything with the University of Houston before heading out of town to get to Lubbock. I got family in Lubbock. I don't want to talk too poorly about the city, but I will say that that's not a thing that I would personally be doing. Someone who spent time both in Houston and Lubbock, I think my choice there would be clear. Now, I will say that, honestly, with the money coming in from the Holgerson thing, Fritz and Joey McGuire, the head coach at Texas Tech, make roughly the same amount of money annually. $750,000 is pretty good for a Big 12 coordinator, and they have more money to offer him, and he certainly has shown he'd earned it. I feel like Ed Houston had adequate time to make a response offer. They probably could have beaten the million-ish I'm hearing that he was getting offered at Tech. And for what it's worth, Houston has paid coordinators that much before. They did that under the Holgorsen administration and the Big 12 and things like that. Man, this one hurts. And I think it most hurts because of the timing. I want to get to that at the end of this. But I do think that, Fritz is a defensive guy as a head coach. He was defensive coordinator. It's been a long time since he was a non-head coach, but he was defensive coordinator a long time ago. And he's got connections to defensive guys across the board. And for what it's worth, Shiel Wood has since 2020. Okay, he spent 2020, 2021 at Army. 2022, he was at Troy. 2023, he was at Tulane. 2024, he's at Houston. Now 2025, he's going to be at Texas Tech. This guy is a bouncer, bouncing around a lot. And for what it's worth, so he went to and graduated from Wofford University, at Wofford College, Wofford. And he spent some time there in like 20 10, 11, 12, took a break to be with his family, and then came back as a safety coach in 2016, became their DC in 2017, and then started jumping right away, right? This guy's just a jumper. And so maybe I should have seen this coming. I just thought he would like see out his contract. And admittedly, this may be because after the kind of season Houston's defense had, they didn't offer him an extension or offer him a increase in pay or like that on Sunday or Monday to end the season right away. Like, hey, we appreciate what you did or whatever. Maybe that was something there. I fully expected that he'd be back because he and Fritz came together and it was just a 2-year contract. And I thought Houston would lose him at the end of next year to be a head coach somewhere, not this year to be a defense coordinator in the Big 12. Names have been thrown around as far as replacements go. Steve Helwick, who I like a lot, writes a lot about college football, is Houston-based. He mentioned that Brian Smith at Rice would be a name to watch. Brian Smith, the defense coordinator at Rice, has pro experience. He was on the good Jet staffs in 2007 to 14. Think like Sanchez, AFC Championship games, etc. Also spent a year with the Eagles, but pro game experience. Been at Rice since 2018. Had a bunch of positions tagged to his name, but has been the defense coordinator there since 2018. Knows Houston, knows the area. Obviously, would be a step up for him. I think you could go get him if you wanted. He's a UMass grad, but he spent a lot of time here, obviously, since he's been at Rice since 2018. Guys, I'm keeping an eye on our Chris Hampton, if they're going to go outside of things. Chris Hampton's just 38 years old. He was a defense coordinator at Tulane with Willie in 2021-22 when they were kind of getting really good there. And he coached DBs at Duke, Tulane, McNeese, and Central Arkansas. So I think he understands enough about with the Tulane, the McNeese, and even Central Arkansas, kind of this part of the world as far as recruiting basis would go. Currently, Chris Hampton is the co-defense coordinator at Oregon, which is the number one team in America, not necessarily because of their defense. They're just really good at everything. But I think that'd be a phone call Willie makes this week. Say, hey, Chris, what would it take to get you? Right now, he's making undoubtedly a bunch of money in bonuses because they're having a great year, but his base salary at Oregon is $800,000. I would imagine whatever they were going to respond to Shiel Wood with would have been more than that. He was making, Shiel Wood's base was $750,000. So I think that's actually a contract they can actually get out there and get on top of, which I think is a credit to what Houston's doing for what it's worth. And then a name if you're going to look internally and get this done fast. Zac Etheridge is a climber in this industry, was an associate head coach at Auburn, coached the secondary, coached Houston's DBs in 2019-20. So he's been here before. It's not like just his first year. He's currently the DBs coach as well. He coached Louisiana corners, coached corners and outside linebackers in West Carolina. Very well respected around coaching circles. And Zac Etheridge is also very well respected internally amongst the guys on the defense. I also think having a great DBs coach like Josh Christian Young to kind of share the DBs load if you were to promote Etheridge helps out a lot because it kind of puts more responsibility on JCY's plate. And it also means that like when Zac would be doing defensive coordinator things, ZCY would be able to JCY be able to do the DBs things, right? And so I think that there are options here. The biggest problem in this was not necessarily losing a defensive coordinator, although Shiel Wood is really good, right? The defense is really good last year. Truthfully, you're going to graduate a lot of those guys. A lot of them left on senior day, and some are going to go pro, like Keith Cooper and stuff like that. We did see that it looks like Jeremiah Wilson will enter the transfer portal. How that's tied to Wood or not Wood, I don't know. He had a kind of year that he might have entered the portal anyway. Timing is timing. The biggest issue on the defensive coordinator position, though, is that timing with the portal opening back up. Signing day starting this week. Fritz and company already have to find an offense coordinator. The timing is the worst part of this, right? And I don't think Shiel Wood is irreplaceable, right? We said this is a good defense. It's not the 85 Bears defense or anything like that. He is replaceable. And again, if you can keep all your position coaches intact, keep those relationships built, hopefully you can get the thing going. That's why I kind of feel like a Chris Hampton who Fritz trusts. You can maybe say, hey, you can even have an associate head coach tagged into your title as well. If you're going from Oregon to Houston to be the only defense coordinator as opposed to a co-defense coordinator or whatever. Or you promote like a Zac Etheridge from internally, right? Something like that to get this done quickly, because that is the biggest deal here to me. This is breaking news. Talk more about that in a second. So that's what I've got on it right now. Now, as this continues to go, I'm going to dive into more defensive candidates and get more out to you. But that's what I've got right now on the defensive coordinator search and defense coordinator story. I want to get to the offensive coordinator search and the offensive coordinator story. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best place to get last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This cool new part of the app called Game Time Picks, right? And so it uses artificial intelligence and kind of compares values and seats and views and things like that. And it tells you the best deal on that sports ticket, concert ticket, comedy show, theater, etc. Whatever kind of event you're going for, it finds you the best deal in that particular venue for that event. Game Time lowest ticket guarantee means you get credit back 110% of the difference if you can find the same section and row cheaper somewhere else. So it's best deal in town, and you know it. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Now the Game Time app, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, looking at the episode I thought I was doing today. Full disclosure, let's actually go through this. I anticipated going through 2 segments of offensive coordinator candidates with you, having a last segment about whatever the Big 12 rankings were in the college football playoff, having a night. Wrote some notes on that, went out and coached a basketball game. My phone is blowing up during the game. We won. We're okay. Come back to check my phone afterwards. And I'm like, holy, blah, 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 blah. Right? Like I had a bunch of stuff to do very quickly. And immediately I could kind of see through my watch, like what was happening, what was going on. And I couldn't really believe exactly what was happening. And then I get closer into it and I was like, oh God. And so while Houston's doing all the defensive coordinator, there's more to figure out on that. The offensive coordinator is a position that Houston knew they were getting into this week after relieving Kevin Barbay of his duties going into the final game and using Sean Bell as the interim. Now, in all the madness of the Shiel Wood news, Duarte kind of leaked a little bit of like, not a bomb, like was it like a hand grenade? Like a little bit of news that I think is worth pointing out. And he said that it sounds like internally, just kind of as a throwaway line, that Houston had hoped to have and thinks they could have an offense coordinator by the end of this week, right? Now, the Shiel Wood news is so big, I think a lot of people read over it really quickly, but that echoes some things I was kind of getting the feeling from as well. And so that makes me think it's one of a handful of guys. And I do want to go through, I guess, where those guys could be coming from. And I guess the first guy is probably the hardest name to pronounce, which is not good on my behalf. But Jim Svoboda is a Midwest guy and was close with Willie Fritz from his time in the Midwest, and also from their time at Tulane. He coached the offense at Tulane in 2022, but Jim Svoboda got out of coaching in 2022. He was in his early 60s then. He's about 64 now. He got out of coaching to go back to the Midwest and be close to family. Now, I wonder if after a couple years off, does Houston have some inkling that he has the itch? Did Houston maybe have that inkling back when they relieved Kevin Barbay of his duties? Was that maybe the trigger for when that all started to go down? Like what part of the chapter was he in there? What chapter of the book, I should say, was he in there? If it is Jim Svoboda, I would imagine that's a match made in heaven for Fritz because they get along so well. They're very much in tune and in sync. They put together a pretty strong roster at Tulane. I would imagine you'd keep a lot of the same positional staff on, and that will help with the recruiting as well. And then Svoboda, obviously has a complementary system to the kinds of things that Willie Fritz wants to do. So Jim Svoboda is one I've got on this. Speaking of Tulane, we've talked about Tulane a lot with this Willie Fritz era. Slade Nagel was the offensive coordinator with Fritz in his final year at Tulane. And he took a $500,000 gig to go coach tight ends at LSU. Now, he did serve as the interim head coach after Fritz left. He, I think, is pretty well respected in coaching circles. He's a Louisiana guy, which is not out of our recruiting realm. But I wonder, so you look at, he's making, I think his 2025 salary is set to be $525,000 coach tight ends LSU. Houston can definitely pay more than that to be the offensive coordinator here. We know that Nagel and Fritz have a good relationship. Again, Tulane connection. We know that Nagel has run an effective offense. Think about that 2023 Tulane offense. Very, very strong. Pratt was American Athletic Conference, this and the other. I mean, it was a very strong offense, both in the quarterback's room, the running back room, the offensive line blocked things up well. It was good, right? And so does Slade Nagel have the itch to get back to calling plays? And after having a taste of being lower on the totem pole or getting out of the offense at LSU, do you go get him by throwing him more money than that 525,000? I think that's a very realistic possibility. I really do. Before I get to my last thought on guys that I think it's going to be short and sweet and to the point, one guy I was intrigued by that I hadn't really talked a lot about yet was Joe Price. Joe Price III, I should say, is the pass game coordinator at UTSA. He's got extensive high school experience in the Houston area. UTSA had a really good offense this past year, even after they moved on from that 12-year quarterback or whatever they had going on there before, right? UTSA feels like a staff that's right for the picking, because it just feels like a matter of time until their head coach moves on to a bigger gig, right? And so, do you go get Joe Price, the pass game coordinator, and give him a bump there? He'd be pretty gettable. He's got Houston connections as far as the city goes. I think that's an easy option. And obviously, I'm a big fan of Brennan Marion. I'm a big fan out at UNLV and the Go-Go offense. I'm a big fan of Jordan Davis up at North Texas, and they had an incredible offense this year. If you want to go back and check some of the numbers on what they were doing in Denton, I think either guy would be a great option. I don't know that they'd be the fast hire that it feels like is being made, unless, frankly, they just saw Houston as a bigger gig because it's in the Power Four, which is fair. It is. That'd be one of my pitches. I think the other way this could be fast, though, is if it's just Sean Bell getting promoted. And I say just because we saw him as the interim, not because I'd be disappointed in it. But with Sean Bell in just a week, really less than a week, because his first practice was Tuesday and they played on Saturday, you saw Sean Bell have a lot of substantial improvements with the exact same roster. I mean, multiple drives that had clear plans in them where you're making play calls with certain plans and certain things that featured guys. You saw Boogie Johnson featured very prominently. Boogie had a kind of cryptic tweet on Tuesday about having to make sure his last year in college next year counted. Well, what better way than to get an offensive coordinator that featured you in the only game that got to call plays in like Sean Bell did? It would be the fastest option here. I frankly would almost be like, why haven't they already announced it if it's him, right? Like, what other digging did they do? If anything, hiring him officially, formally promoting him later this week would almost feel slow given who it is, right? And then the biggest thing in Deshaun Bell is not just that he's young, he's comes from a coaching family and coaching tree, both very literally. Sean Bell is, reputed to be one of the great coordinators in college football, right? Did a lot of things at Baylor when they were getting all these big name recruits and stuff like that. Had Baylor in the top 3 for DJ Lagway before he went to Florida and so on, right? Sean Bell comes to Houston. A big part of that is recruiting, because the things he can do in the state of Texas with recruiting and the way he closes deals with recruits and stuff like that. Once the guy's got a taste of being an offensive coordinator, you wonder if the recruiting aspect he brings is worth keeping him on as the OC, because frankly, he didn't give you any reason to not keep him on as the OC. The offense was a lot better in the game he was in charge of. It wasn't perfect, but he also had to deal with the roster limitations he had to deal with, right? And so as the roster gets better through things like his own recruiting, do you think he can pull those kinds of things around? And if if it's fast, like Duarte and others might have insinuated, if it's this week, that would make sense. But you're trying to get at the front of the portal season, but also with signing day, uh, guys that have committed to Houston would have some. I mean, their position coaches would all assume still be intact. Their connections. Austin Carlisle, right, was recruited by Sean Bell as a quarterbacks coach, right? That those kinds of things are important. Carlisle's going to be a big part of this program's future. And for what it's worth, in all the coaching changes, he has maintained he is signing with Houston on signing day, and he's coming to school in January as an early enrollee. Like he's coming to school here. And so that matters too. So I could see it being any of those guys. Honestly, while I've expressed how much I like the go-go offense selfishly as a guy that likes coaching and the X's and O's, and I'm incredibly impressed by what Jordan Davis did up at North Texas. If it's going to be fast, I almost lean into Sean Bell because I think the positive side of things can outweigh others. And so I guess that's where I sit on it. But if you know if I'm wrong again, the second big one I'm wrong on this week, and we'll talk about it as we talk about it, as we do each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. Now, I want to spend a second talking some about the Big 12 getting screwed. Spoiler: Big 12 got screwed again, just like we thought they would. But before we get to that, if you think you can predict the future about the coordinators or whatever, you probably need to head over to FanDuel because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And right now, you can get in on the action by putting down $5 and getting $150 back in bonus bets if that first bet hits. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com. Join today. Just get started with $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits at FanDuel.com. Now, where's the hunch? Make everyone more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, talking about more big picture news at Houston. And I guess this final segment is one that we kind of all saw coming, but the Big 12 gets screwed. Shocker. College football playoff rankings officially came out Tuesday evening. Big 12 got left actually completely out of the top 12. But Arizona State is the potentially fifth highest ranked conference champion, and thus would be in as the 12 seed in the college football playoff. And they'd have to beat Iowa State, I guess, technically, but we can assume that if Iowa State won, they'd be the fifth highest ranked based on the way they filled it out. They'd be the fifth highest ranked conference champion as well. So it feels like the Big 12 is going to get the one team in, which is, I guess, better than it could have been, but also just that the Big 12 is getting screwed. And I think the funniest part about Big 12 getting screwed here is that people are talking about it in ways that are, frankly, at least very Twitter funny. If you don't laugh, you cry. So I guess that's the way to go about this. But we talked about it in yesterday's episode. I want to reiterate, this will be a problem because Houston's going to build this thing up to win this conference. The Willie Fritz thing is working. I understand Shiel Wood just left, and I understand they're hiring coordinators and that kind of thing, but the momentum is very much in the right direction. Coordinators come and go. The biggest problem with the coordinators right now is the timing, not the people. And so this feels like SEC favoritism over all this hypothetical game crap. Like, for lack of a better phrase, it's the hypothetical Vegas line in hypothetical games is essentially leading to a bunch of SEC bias in the seeding. And for example, Alabama is 11th, and Alabama gets 11th and is in the college football playoff seemingly no matter what, because if SMU wins the ACC championship game, they're ahead of Alabama. If they lose, they'll probably drop back behind Alabama, and Alabama doesn't play this weekend, so they're not impacted by all of that, right? Alabama, you'll remember, got blown out by Oklahoma and Norman, 24-3. 24-3. When Houston went to Norman, without Zion Chris, right, banged up from the UNLV game, with coordinator Kevin Barbay, they played Oklahoma to a 4-point game, and it was a 2-point game with very little time remaining before ultimately that safety thing happened, right? Uh, that's a much different game than what Alabama and Oklahoma went through. And frankly, I think it stands to reason this hypothetical game kind of deal that the SEC likes to do. If Deion Chris plays, I think Houston wins that game. I don't think I'm crazy for saying that either. Instead, we're going to go down this path where Alabama, with 3 losses to a bad Oklahoma and a bad Vanderbilt program, both of those teams only won 6 games, right? Barely made bowl eligibility. Alabama and their 3 losses are going to be 11th overall. Boise, who their best game was apparently they're barely losing to Oregon. They did lose, which makes that wild, but that's their best game they played all year. So they're going to be a higher ranked conference champion than whoever wins the Big 12, which is ludicrous because they didn't play other Power 4 teams. But um, anyway, they're going to be in the top, get a first round bye even or whatever, right? Indiana beat less presently ranked teams this season than BYU did. But because they have 1 loss and the only game against a ranked team at present tense that they played, uh, they have 1 loss, 1-for-1 there. They're in over a BYU or an Iowa State. They got blown out in that game, too, for its worth. BYU's 2 losses were both single-digit losses. Notre Dame has 1 win over a team that is currently ranked. That was number 24 Army. Notre Dame also lost in Northern Illinois at home. There's no way that schedule is better than Iowa State or the BYU schedule playing in the Big 12. And this degradation of the brand is disheartening. And I guess I bring it up because, like I said, I think it's going to impact Houston when Houston is in the seat to win this conference in the next couple of years. I think you're looking at 2026, 2027, if being honest, but things turn around faster than that in college football all the time. We look at what Colorado did in year 2 with Deion, or frankly, what Baylor did from last year's 3 wins to this year, and the offense they put together with a year of good NIL and a couple coordinator hires. Hey, that sounds familiar. At least people talk about it now, though. So Texas Tech coach Joey, not Jerry, that's a movie, Joey McGuire, said this week that apparently it's all about the patch on the jersey. Got a lot of kind of stuff on social media from that. But on Tuesday night, after the rankings were announced, Iowa State AD Jamie Pollard tweeted that the message is just about winning as many games as possible, and that strength of schedule does not matter. He pointed to Indiana, pointed to SMU, he pointed to Boise State as examples of just win all of the games, and who you play doesn't really matter, right? That was funny. The SMU athletic director responded. I actually don't know the guy's name. I should probably know that. But SMU athletic director responded by pointing out that they won all of their conference games and have 9 Power 4 wins because they have the 8 plus they beat TCU. And something to the effect of "stay off my lawn" or something, "get off my lawn" or whatever, old man yelling at cloud kind of metaphors, right? Pollard, the Iowa State AD, responded by doubling down, saying that SMU on Twitter, let's see, tweet this out, it's all public. SMU hasn't had to play Clemson, Miami, or Georgia Tech, who are the 3 next highest ACC teams, and lost to BYU at home, and then called the SMU AD's lawn, quote, artificial. And I think it is exactly that, right? SMU didn't have to play the best teams in the ACC yet. I mean, maybe they beat the breaks off Clemson. I don't know, but they haven't had to. The Big 12 was a slaughterhouse because it's all a bunch of good teams. No, there's no Oregon in this conference this year. There will be in future years. There isn't right now. And teams like Houston, I guess, who played Oklahoma closer than Alabama did, just don't matter because, they have a great defense that apparently has a defense coordinator worth poaching. Like these things just don't line up. But the SEC brand makes certain TV networks money. Those TV networks have a lot of say in things. These games are going to be on those TV networks. And, if we're being blunt about it, the way it's set up right now, I think you have Notre Dame and Alabama potentially playing in the first round. That'd be a pretty strong opening round game as far as TV numbers go. And maybe that's more important than getting things right. I don't know. It's disheartening as someone who is so excited about Houston being in the Big 12. because it is such a fun conference. It's a crazy competitive conference. The teams that you just don't know what's going to happen on a given week. Whether it's Scatabo going crazy, Deion Chris running all over TCU. You just don't know. And apparently, good football doesn't matter as much as just win a bunch of games against bad teams, because bad teams with good names or good logos on their jerseys is more important. Anyway, I could go on and on about that, but I like Houston being in the Big 12. I'm appreciative, but this is something to monitor as it continues to happen, because eventually it's going to hurt. We'll be there to talk about when it does. Basketball stuff coming up too, signing day Wednesday, all kinds of big stuff going on. If there are any big flips or whatever on Wednesday, you're going to know what's going on. You're going to hit subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you know we're live. TikTok is Pains with 512 as well. We have shorts and stuff like that up on all those. If something big were to happen on signing day, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked On Coogs, the primary of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.